And now, a speech delivered by Benito Mussolini in Rome on February the 23rd, 1941, as read by a teddy bear in a high-pitched, silly voice.
Black shirts of Rome, I come among you to look you firmly in the eyes, feel your temperature, and break the silence which is dear to me, especially in wartime. Have you ever asked yourself in an hour of meditation, which everyone finds during the day, how long we have been at war? Not only 8 months, as a superficial observer of events might believe, not from September the 1st, 1939, when through guarantees to Poland, Britain unleashed the conflagration with a criminal and meditated will. We have been at war 6 years, precisely from February the 1st, 1935, when the first communique announcing the mobilization of Peloritana was issued. The Ethiopian War was hardly finished when from the other shore of the Mediterranean there reached us appeals from General Franco, who had begun his national revolution. Could we fascisti leave without answer that cry and remain indifferent in the face of the perpetuation of the bloody crimes of the so-called popular fronts? Could we refuse to give our aid to the movement of salvation that had found in Antonio Primo de Rivera its creator, ascetic and martyr? No. Thus our first squadron of airplanes left on July 27th, 1936, and during the same day we had our first dead. We have actually been at war since 1922, that is, from the day when we lifted the flag of our revolution, which was then defended by a handful of men against the Masonic, democratic, capitalistic world. From that day, world liberalism, democracy and plutocracy declared and waged war against us with press campaigns, spreading libelous reports, financial sabotage, attempts and plots even when we were intent upon the work of international reconstruction, which is and will remain for centuries as the undestroyable documentation of our creative will. With the outbreak of hostilities on September 1st, 1939, we had just finished 2 wars which imposed relatively modest sacrifices in human life, but had forced us to make an enormous logistic and financial effort. On another occasion, not to tie you with too many figures, our invention in the Phalangist Revolution will be documented. This is why, and was publicly declared in September 1939, when the reckoning of accounts had to be reached between 2 worlds which were inevitably antagonistic, we preferred to have it retarded as long as necessary for us to replace that which we consumed or ceded. But developments in history, which sometimes are speeded up, cannot be halted any more than the fleeting moment of Faust could be halted. History takes one by the throat and forces a decision. This is not the first time this has occurred in the history of Italy. If we had been 100% ready, we would have ended the war in September 1939 and not in June 1940. During that brief period of time, we faced and overcame exceptional difficulties.
Do you truly love me, Marjorie?
The lightning-like and crushing victory of Germany in the West eliminated the eventuality of a long continental war. Since then, the land war on the continent has ended, and it cannot flare back. The German victory was facilitated by Italian non-belligerency, which immobilized heavy naval, air, and land forces of the Anglo-French bloc. Some people who today apparently think Italy's intervention was premature were probably the same who then I deemed it too late. In reality, the moment was timely, because it is true that one enemy was in the course of liquidation. There remained the other, the bigger one, the most powerful enemy, number one, against whom we are engaged and against whom we will continue the struggle to the last drop of blood. Having definitely liquidated Britain's armies on the European continent, the war could not but assume a naval air and, for us, also a colonial character. It is the geographic and historic order of things that the most difficult and most far-away theatres of war are reserved for Italy. War beyond the sea and in the desert. Our fronts stretch for thousands of kilometres, and thousands of kilometres away. Some ignorant, vain foreign commentators should take due account of this. However, during the first 4 months of the war, we were able to inflict grave naval, air, and land blows to the force of the British Empire. Since 1935, the attention of our General Staff has been focused on Libya. All the work of the governors who succeeded each other in Libya was aimed at strengthening economically and militarily that large region, transforming the former desert or desert zones into fecund land. Miracles! This word is able to sum up what has been done down there. With European tension becoming graver, and following the events of 1935-1936, Libya, reconquered by fascism, was considered one of the most delicate points in our general strategic setup, since it could be attacked from 2 fronts. The effort carried out militarily to strengthen Libya is shown by these figures. Only during the period that goes from October 1st, 1937 to January 31st, 1940, were sent to Libya 14,000 officers and 396,358 soldiers, and organized 2 armies, the 5th and 10th. This latter had 10 divisions. In the same period were sent 1,924 cannon of all calibers, and many of them recent construction and model. 15,386 machine guns, 11 million rounds of shells, 1,344,287,275 bullets for light arms, 127,877 tons of engineers' materials, 779 tanks with a certain percentage of heavy tanks, 9,584 auto vehicles of various kinds, 4,809 motorcycles. These figures show that to the preparation of the Libyan defence we devoted an effort which can be described as imposing. The same thing can be said as far as East Africa is concerned, where we prepared to resist despite the distance and total isolation, which is a tribute to the will and courage of our soldiers. The soldiers who are fighting in the Empire without any hope of help are farthest, but therefore nearest to our hearts. Commanded by the born soldier, the Viceroy is, and by a group of generals of great valour, the national native soldiers will cause great trouble to the enemy.
Hello, Mrs. Hutchinson. I'm sorry, but we did all we could, but your son didn't make it. He passed away. I'm sorry.
It was during October and November that Great Britain gathered and lined up against the mass of her imperial forces, recruited from 3 continents and armed by a 4th. She concentrated in Egypt 15 divisions and considerable mass of armoured means, and hurled them against our lines in America. On the first line were Libyan divisions, brave and faithful, but unsuited to bear the attack of enemy machines. On December, a battle was thus started, which was only 5 or 10 days in advance of ours, and which brought the enemy to Benghazi. We are not like the English. We boast that we are not like them. We haven't elevated lying into a government art, nor into a narcotic for the people the way the London government has done. We call bread bread, and wine, And when the enemy wins a battle, it is useless and ridiculous to seek, as the English do, in their incomparable hypocrisy, to deny or diminish it. One entire army, the 10th, was broken up almost completely with its men and cannon. The 5th Air Squadron was literally sacrificed almost entirely. Where possible, we resisted strongly and furiously. Since we recognize these facts, it is useless for the enemy to exaggerate the figures of its booty. It is because we are certain regarding the grade of national maturity reached by the Italian people, and regarding the future development of events, that we continue to follow the cult of truth and repudiate all falsification. The events during these months exasperate our will, and must accentuate against the enemy that cold, conscious, implacable hate in every home, which is indispensable for victory. Great Britain's last support on the continent was and is Greece, the only nation that did not want to renounce the British guarantee. It was necessary to face Greece, and on this point the accord of all responsible military leaders was absolute. I add that the operative plan prepared by the superior command of the armed forces of Albania was unanimously approved without reservations. Between the decision and the start of action there was a delay of only 2 days. Let it be said once for all that the Italian soldiers in Albania combated superbly. Let it be said in particular that the Alpini wrote pages of blood and glory that would honour any army. When the sufferings of the march by the Julia Division almost up to Metsovo are known, all will appear legendary. Neutrals of every continent who are spectators of the bloody clashes between the armed masses must have sufficient shame to keep quiet and not expect libellous, provocative opinions. The Italian prisoners who fell into the hands of the Greeks are a few thousand, most of them wounded. The Greek successes do not go out of the tactical field, and only megalomania has magnified them. The Greek losses are very high, and shortly it will be spring, and as befits such a season, our season, beautiful things will go. I say beautiful things will be seen in every one of the 4 cardinal points.
Welcome to the Phantom Zone.
Not less heavy are the losses we inflicted on the English. To state as they do that their losses in the Battle of 60 Days in Serenia are not above 2,000 dead and wounded means adding a grotesque note to the drama. It means attempting to exceed themselves as far as shameless lies are concerned, which would seem difficult for the English. They must add at least 1 0 to the figures of their communiques. From November the 7th, to when English torpedo planes, which took off not from Greek bases but from an aircraft carrier, succeeded with their coup at Taranto, which we admitted we met adversity in the war. We must recognize this. We had grey days. This happens in all wars, in all times. Think of the Punic Wars, when the Battle of Cannae threatened to crush Rome, but at Zama, Rome destroyed Carthage and wiped it out from geography and history forever. Our capacity to recuperate in moral and material fields is really formidable and constitutes one of the peculiar characteristics of our race. Especially in this war, which has the world as its theatre and pits continent directly or indirectly against one another. On land and sea and in the air, it is the final battle that counts. That we shall have to fight hard is certain. That we shall have to fight long is also probable. But the final result will be an Axis victory. Great Britain cannot win the war. I can prove this logically, and in this case belief is corroborated by fact. This proof begins with a dogmatic premise that although anything may happen, Italy will march with Germany side by side to the end. Those who may be tempted to imagine something different forget that the alliance between Italy and Germany is not only between 2 states or 2 armies or 2 diplomacies, but between 2 peoples and 2 revolutions, and is destined to give its imprint upon the century. The collaboration offered by the Führer and that which the German air and armoured units are giving in the Mediterranean are proof that all fronts are common and that our efforts are common. The Germans know that Italy today has on her shoulders the weight of 1 million British and Greek soldiers, of from 1,500 to 2,000 planes, out of many tanks, of thousands of cannon, of at least 500,000 tons of military shipping. Cooperation between the two armed forces occurs on the plan of comradely, loyal, spontaneous solidarity. Let it be said for foreigners who are always ready to libel that the comportment of German soldiers in Sicily and Libya is under all respects perfect and worthy of a strong army and a strong people brought up under severe discipline. Follow me now, please. First, in war, potentially, Germany did not only decrease after 17 months of war, but increased in gigantic proportions. From the standpoint of human losses, they have been at a minimum if compared with the masses in action. Losses of materials were more than compensated for by immense booty and were absolutely insignificant.
Please refrain from eating the Miliband's.
The unity of political and military command in the hands of the Führer, he who once was simple soldier and volunteer, Adolf Hitler, gives to the operations an enthusiastic, irresistible, revolutionary, and therefore national socialist rhythm that begins with the highest generals and goes to the humblest soldiers. Britain will realize that once again. Second, German armaments are in quality and quantity infinitely superior to those available at the start of the war. Germany has not yet brought to the limit the employment of her human forces. For Italy, it is just the same. We have at present under arms more than 2 million men, but within the year we will, if necessary, reach 4 million. Third, while during the World War Germany was isolated in Europe from the world, today the Axis is a master of the continent and allied with Japan. The Scandinavian world, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, is directly or indirectly inside the German orbit. The Danubian and Balkan world cannot ignore and does not ignore the Axis. Hungary and Romania have joined the Tripartite Pact. Occupied France, Belgium, Holland and Luxembourg are, like the Scandinavian and Danubian worlds, within the orbit of Germany. In the Mediterranean, Italy is allied with a friendly Spain. There remains Russia, but her fundamental interests advise her also to follow in the future a good neighbour policy with Germany. Europe, therefore, with the exception of Portugal, Switzerland, and, for a little while yet, Greece, is all outside the orbit of Britain and against Britain. Fourth, with this situation things are diametrically opposed to conditions from 1914 to 1918. Then the blockade was a terrible weapon in the hands of the Great Britain. Today this is a broken weapon because, from being a blockading nation, Britain became blockaded by the Axis air and naval forces and will increasingly be blockaded until catastrophe comes. Fifth, the morale of the Axis people is infinitely superior to the morale of the British people. The Axis fights in certainty of victory, while the British fight because, as Lord Halifax said, they have no other choice. It is highly ridiculous to count on the eventual moral breakdown of the Italian people. This will never happen. To speak of a separate peace is idiotic. Churchill has not the least idea of the spiritual forces of the Italian people, or what fascism can do. We can understand Churchill's ordering the shelling of industrial plants at Genoa to disrupt work, but to shell the city in order to break down its morale is a childish illusion. It means that the British do not at all know the race temperament of the Ligurian people in general, and the Guianese in particular. It means they are ignorant of the civilian virtues and proud patriotism of the people who gave the fatherland Columbus, Garibaldi, and Mazzini. Sixth, Great Britain is alone. This isolation pushes her towards the United States, from which she urgently and desperately seeks aid. The industrial power of the United States certainly is great, but for aid to be useful supplies must safe reach England, and also be of such quantity as not to only replace the destruction already inflicted, and that which will come to the industrial plants of Britain, but also bring about superiority over Germany. This is impossible because Germany now works with the men, machines, and raw materials of the entire European continent. Seventh, when Great Britain falls, then the war will be ended, even if by any chance it should die out slowly in other countries of the British Empire. Unless, and it is possible, these countries, where already something is fermenting, do not teach their independence once the metropolitan area is conquered. This would bring about a change not only in the European political map, but also in the world's map.
I went to the North Atlantic Ocean on holiday once, and it was a bit wet for my liking, yeah.
Eighth, in this gigantic struggle, Italy has a first-class job. Our war power also improves daily in quality and quantity. 2 of the 3 great ships damaged at Taranto are already in the way of complete repair. Technicians and workers toil day and night, giving a convincing demonstration not only of their professional capacity, but also of their patriotism. When the war is over, in the world's social revolution that will be followed by a more equitable distribution of the earth's riches, due account must be kept of the sacrifices and of the discipline maintained by the Italian workers. The fascist revolution will make another decisive step to shorten the social distances. 9th, that fascist Italy dared measure herself against Great Britain is a matter of pride that will live through the centuries. It is an act of conscious daring. People become great by daring, risking, and suffering, and not by placing themselves by the wayside in parasitic and vile expectancy. The protagonists of history can reivindicate their rights, but simple spectators never can. 10th, to beat the Axis, Great Britain's armies would have to land on the continent, invade Germany and Italy, and defeat their armies. And this no Englishman, no matter how insane and delirious, and by the use of abuse of drugs and alcohol, can ever dream of. Let me say now that what is occurring in the United States is one of the most colossal mystifications in all history. Illusion and lying are the basis of American interventionism. Illusion that the United States is still a democracy, where instead it is a political and financial oligarchy dominated by Jews through a personal form of dictatorship. The lie is that the Axis powers, after they finish Great Britain, want to attack America. Neither in Rome nor Berlin are such fantastic plans as this prepared. These projects could not be made by those who have an inclination for the madhouse. Though we certainly are totalitarian, and will always be so, we have our feet on hard ground. Americans who will read what I say should be calm and not believe in the existence of a big bad wolf who wants to devour them. In all cases, it is more likely that the United States, before it is attacked by Axis soldiers, will be attacked by the not well-known but very warlike inhabitants of the planet Mars, who will descend from the stratosphere in unimaginable flying fortresses. Rome, comrades, through you I want to speak to the Italian people, to the authentic, real, great Italian people who fight with the courage of lions on land, sea and air fronts. People who will early in the morning are up to go to work in fields, factories and offices, people who do not permit themselves luxuries, not even innocent ones. They absolutely must not be confused or contaminated by the minority or well-known poltroons, antisocial individuals and complainers who grumble about rations and regret their suspended comforts, or by snakes, the remains of the Masonic lodges, whom we will crush with difficulties when and how we want. The Italian people, the fascist people, deserve and will have victory. The hardships, suffering, and sacrifices that are faced with exemplary courage and dignity by the Italian people will have their day of compensation, when all the enemy forces are crushed on the battlefield by the heroism of our soldiers, and a triple, immense cry will cross the mountains and oceans like lightning, and light new hopes and give new certainties to spirit multitudes. Victory, Italy, peace with justice among peoples.
And now on BBC4, the shipping forecast.